Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Jeff Callahan here, founder of Become More Compelling, and welcome to a very special episode of Become More Compelling Radio. Typically, what I do is I have on charisma, people skills, compelling, awesome guests, and I suck their brains dry just like a zombie, and I present that glorious information to you on a silver platter. A little bit different format today. I'm testing out a new format that is a smaller episode, probably 15, 20 minutes, something like that. And it's just me. We're just having a conversation. It's small talk with Jeff. And each solo episode will have a theme. So the theme of today's episode is action. How do you cut through all the noise and actually take action? How do you cut down on the amount of information you consume so that you can take action? We're going to get into all that. First, a couple of quick announcements. You already know about the new format. My guest-based episodes are not going anywhere. I love them. I've got a few that I need to sit down and edit as we speak. So those aren't going anywhere. I just want another option to communicate with you on a little bit more frequent basis. So I'm very excited about these. Also, if you haven't signed up to receive email from me, please do. You can go to becomemorecompelling.com/go to sign up to receive email from me. I've actually, some awesome stuff's happening. People have literally told me that my emails have changed their life, which is kind of nuts. To me, it's an email that I write, but people find so much value in it that they send me long paragraphs back and say like, look, this really has a huge impact on who I am and what I know I'm capable of. So to hear that is pretty amazing, and it blows me away every time I receive an email like that. So if you want that kind of good stuff when it comes to supercharging your charisma and people skills, sign up at becomemorecompelling.com/go. Also, if you like this podcast, if you've listened to a previous episode, or you really end up digging this one, please go to iTunes and type in Become More Compelling Radio and leave me a review. I'll make it easy. I'll get a link and send it to you in the show notes along with this episode. Leave me that review because I want to know what you like so I can continue to do more of it. I eat those reviews like Cookie Monster eats cookies. So without further ado, let's hop into today's topic. Action. What is it? How do you do it? What's too much information? What's not enough information? We're actually going to start with a quote from Jeff Bezos. You might know him as the CEO of the galaxy. He's around everywhere. He's got Whole Foods now. He runs Amazon. This quote is great because it talks about the importance of taking action and kind of considers how much information you should get, which I find that very, very valuable as an overthinker. Quote, most decisions should probably be made with somewhere around 70% of the information you wish you had. If you wait for 90%, in most cases, you're probably being slow. That quote is really interesting to me because it really hits on kind of the default operating procedure of a lot of folks when it comes to making a decision. This could be a decision about changing careers. It could be a simple decision of, do I walk up to that person and start a conversation? We as humans, I think we default to wanting to have a lot of information because we don't like uncertainty. Uncertainty feels uncomfortable to us, and we want to have as much information as possible in the hope that the more information we get, the more our hopes of, I hope this transition goes smoothly. I hope this career change works out. I hope this conversation with this person works out. We want to be sure that that's going to work out in the positive for us. But the reality is, in a lot of these situations, you have to almost take a ready, fire, aim mindset, which we're going to talk about. So what Bezos talks about is, look, if you've waited until you've got 90% of available information, you're probably being too slow. But 70%, you're probably doing all right. So this kind of flies in the face of what a lot of us perfectionists, we're like, oh man, I could never do that. We're going to outline some strategies and some tactics in this podcast episode so that you can confidently take action and have more of a bias towards action. Because what you'll find once you flex that muscle of proceeding with less information than you're comfortable with, keyword comfortable, this doesn't mean do before you think. When you proceed with less information than you're comfortable with, that frees you up to correct course along the way and really get into a mindset of action over motion. There's a really good author that I like a lot. His name is James Clear, and he's written sort of a famous article about motion versus action. I'll link that to you in the show notes, but an example of motion versus action that James gives on his website is, quote, if I outline 20 ideas for articles I want to write, that's motion. If I actually write and publish an article, that's action. Another example that he gives is if I go to the gym and ask about a personal trainer, that's motion. If I get underneath the squat rack and start doing squats, that's action. So the thing I really like about the whole concept of momentum and action and having that bias towards action is you can rapidly improve in a much shorter amount of time than you could if you were on the sidelines, just getting all the information in the world so that you can feel comfortable before you start acting. I actually just finished a book called Boyd, the fighter pilot that changed the art of war. It's an amazing book on strategy. John Boyd was a really interesting guy. He was a colonel in the Air Force, and he pioneered what's known as the OODA loop, the OODA loop. That stands for Observe, Orient, Decide, Act. It's been applied in a multitude of different areas at this point. It originally was applied through John Boyd was known as 42nd Boyd. So how John Boyd got the nickname 42nd Boyd was that he could maneuver in such a way where if he had an enemy aircraft on his tail, he could maneuver in such a way where he could end up on that enemy's tail in 40 seconds or less. And what's interesting is, he was amazing at it. The name 42nd Boyd is actually not completely correct because he could in reality do it in many cases in 20 seconds. But he would actually bet his new cadets at the school that he taught at, he would bet them money that he could always do this in 40 seconds or less. So that's how he got that legendary nickname. And a lot of that goes into his ability to observe the situation, orient himself, decide, and then act. And then once you start getting really good at that loop, that OODA loop, as Boyd described, you can go from observing to acting almost instantaneously because you're able, it's almost like a domino falling and then another domino falls and another domino falls. You're using that momentum to push you along the decision-making process. There's actually an amazing, an incredible write-up on the OODA loop from The Art of Manliness, which I'll link to in the show notes as well. So when it comes to people skills, what a lot of us worry about is we want the conversation that we walk into, be it around the water cooler at work or happy hour at a bar or a dinner party that we've been invited to. We want those conversations to feel really good and we want to feel connected to other people. That's the end result that we want. But sometimes we worry about having the perfect thing to say, or I don't know what to say in this situation. My mind seems to shut off in that situation. And there's a lot of tendency to want to gather as much information as possible. So before we even go out, we may read a dozen articles on small talk and wonder what's the perfect thing to say? What's the perfect way to prep? It's important to ask yourself when you're learning any new skill. You need to ask yourself, is the information I'm looking at right now, is that something that I'm actually going to use in the next 48 hours? I call that the 48-hour filter. If it's not, then you need to close that tab and move on and do something else. But if it is, great, because that means that you can actually put it into practice and into use very quickly. And guess what? You will learn probably about 100x or 1,000x more from one or two actual conversations using some new strategy or tactic that you've learned about. You're going to learn a lot more from that than reading 10 or 20 or 25 articles, watching 25 YouTube videos. You're going to learn so much more by actually being in the moment and practicing this new skill. A good way to think about this kind of information as well is, are you prepping for just in case information? Like just in case I stumble upon a left-handed barber from Boise versus just in time information. Oh, I want to know how to use my body language to start a conversation. If you're thinking about just in case information, that's hoarding information. It's like you're filling up a backpack with more supplies than you'll ever need. And all that's going to do is slow you down and your progress is not going to be nearly as fast. But if you're looking at just in time information, coupled with the 48-hour filter, you're going to be able to put that into practice rapidly. And the nice thing is, if you're on the fence and you don't know if you're going to use it in the next 48 hours, that may be the push to actually schedule something, which this is something else that I want to talk about. I sent out an email recently where I talked about something called the strategic yes. What is the strategic yes? So I have a confession, okay? So I love the movie Yes Man with Jim Carrey. If you haven't seen the movie, the plot roughly is Jim Carrey is a guy who says no to everything. I think he just got divorced. He's really down. So he's saying no to everything. He's dodging his friends, that kind of stuff. Then something crazy happens. Again, no spoilers, but he starts saying yes to everything because he thinks that he has to. So this got me thinking. It's really easy to say no to things. It's easy for your default to be no. And in fact, it can feel kind of like there's an epidemic of no by default going on right now. If you type in how to say no, you're going to get hit with a million different articles, titles like "The only thing you should say is no," "The art of saying no," "Get better at saying no." So the messaging all around us is don't say yes and stretch yourself too thin, protect yourself and just default to no. The danger with that line of thinking is that you'll miss out on a ton of great experiences. Now, you shouldn't misunderstand me, don't get me wrong. The skill of saying no and setting boundaries, that's extremely important, and that's very important in many different areas of life. But all I'm suggesting here is maybe it's okay to have a framework for taking action, like we've been talking about, and saying yes to great experiences. Since 2018 is the year of action, if you're listening to this in the future, this can be your year of action as well. I'd like to suggest a healthy trade-off, the strategic yes. What if you flip your default from no to yes for just 1 week per month? This means instead of talking yourself out of events, I can't, I have work tomorrow, I can't, I've got to go home and wash clothes, whatever it is. This means instead of talking yourself out of those events, what if you said yes and you end up doing things that you'll remember forever? So that means for 1 week, if a friend asks you to grab a drink at 9 p.m., even though you've got work the next day, say yes. You see a networking event that you normally just kind of talk yourself out of, say yes. You get asked to go bowling with only 15 minutes to spare, say yes. This happened to me last week, and I said yes, and it was amazing. I had a great time. It's important to say yes, because that strategic yes mindset is all about saying yes to yourself and yes to opportunities that you might turn down out of reflex. Now, it's funny, when I appear on other people's podcasts, OPP, other people's podcasts, I often get asked, what makes a compelling person? I think I'm going to have to answer that question for as long as Become More Compelling is around. But a big piece of that puzzle is being open to new and exciting experiences. The way I look at it, I imagine a circle. So you've got kind of your default circle. Let's say it's the size of a basketball. If you say no to things more and more and more, that circle, it ends up shrinking. It shrinks to the size of a golf ball. Now, people aren't inviting you out as much because they know that you say no. You're also reinforcing to yourself that like, oh, look, I just don't say yes to that kind of stuff. I don't do that. You're reinforcing it from an identity level as well. But let's flip that on its head for a second. Say that you start saying yes to more and more and more things. Maybe you're only doing it for 1 week a month, but that's paying off really well for you. And now that instead of a size of a golf ball or a basketball, now it's the size of like a huge beach ball, and it's gotten bigger. The real world impact of growing that circle is more connections with people. So saying yes to a conference, you meet people. That's a way to say yes. More friends, because when you say yes and you go out, maybe they bring their friends and you meet new people. More invites. Like we talked about, if you consistently decline invites, eventually they're going to dry up and people are just going to not invite you because guess what? No one likes to constantly be turned down. And on a deeper level, you're going to have more experiences to look back favorably on. You're going to have less regret as you get older. The great thing about the strategic yes is that you can dial up or down based on how social you want to be that month. So you can say yes 5 times, get things scheduled out, perfect. Or you can say yes a bunch more times and have an amazing month where you're really busy, but take the next month off. You can dial it up and dial it down. Just remember, if you catch yourself saying no as a default too much when it comes to those invites or those opportunities, you have an option. You can change. All right, as a summary, when it comes to action, so 70% equals done. Use the 48-hour filter. If you don't think you're going to use the information that you're consuming within 48 hours, bookmark that article that you're reading, save it, and then close it out and do something else. If you're on the fence, then make plans to actually use what you're learning about. That includes this podcast, by the way. Remember that just-in-time information versus just-in-case information. Those two things, very different. Just-in-case information is you hoarding information, putting a lot of not useful information because it's not time sensitive in that backpack and it's going to slow down your progress, versus just-in-time information where you're using something that you're going to actually put into practice in a short amount of time. And I'll hit you with one more really good tactic to use to start saying yes. I call this if, when, then. If, when, then. This is great for if a certain situation arises, when I'm somewhere, then I will say blank. So an example might be when I grab coffee at Starbucks, if there's someone in line, then I'll start a tiny conversation with them. Or when I walk into work, if there's someone near my desk, then I'll say hi. When I get invited to do something, then I'll say yes if I don't have any other commitments that day. Really simple framework to just get yourself out of the routine of saying no by default. Okay, that's going to be the show. As always, show notes available at becomemorecompelling.com. Link will be in the podcast description. Again, let me know how you like this smaller episode, this kind of bite-sized episode. You can email me at jeff@becomemorecompelling.com. And again, if you haven't signed up to receive email from me, please do at becomemorecompelling.com/go. I'll start you off with my ultimate guide to joining and enjoying group conversations. It's actually a 56-minute audio training where I dive into the super nitty-gritty, like geeky body language stuff, as well as word-for-word scripts to get you started and get you taking action when it comes to joining and enjoying group conversations. Until next time, I'm Jeff Callahan, founder of Become More Compelling. Talk soon.